that every year someone gets it in their head that in order to protect the children or in order to save us from the terrorists, we need to backdoor all end-to-end encryption because we need to see what is going on there in order to catch the bad guys. And just as you cannot create a tracker that doesn't alert bad guys, that is not a perfect stalking device, you cannot create a backdoor that only good guys can use.
Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, my friends. You know what time it is. It is time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. And one thing I promised you I was doing this year is not just giving you great content from me, but bringing in leaders, thinkers, people that are changing the world to get their perspective on cybersecurity, life, and what it takes to really survive and thrive in this crazy, crazy world that we live in. So I'm so excited for today's guest, Eva. She is taking a stand. She's protecting people. She's protecting us online. And once again, I don't do great with bios. So Eva, can you sort of give a great intro on your background, what you're doing and the amazing work and how you're changing lives on a daily basis?
Sure, no problem. My name is Eva Galperin. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a digital civil liberties organization. Our job is to make sure that when you go online, your rights come with you. I work on EFF's public interest technology team, where I have spent the last 19 years working on protecting vulnerable populations. So that can be everything from journalists to activists to survivors of domestic abuse and LGBTQ populations all over the world. So it's been an exciting ride.
So first, thank you for what you're doing, because we need a lot more people that do that. But I guess I'll just sort of start when you say what you're doing just looking at everything that's going on today, it can almost seem overwhelming. Like, how do you go in and sort of can step back and sort of see the good and prioritize and look at the areas to focus in on? Because there's just so much craziness going on and no one's really protecting us or keeping us safe. So can you sort of, what does a day look like? How do you go about challenges? How do you tackle the big issues that matter and not get caught up in the noise?
Well, I would be hard-pressed to describe a typical day because all of my days are very different from one another.
I would agree with that.
For example, just got off a plane from Prague, where I was the keynote for B-Sides Prague last week, and I talked to about 500 or 600 hackers about how not to build the Torment Nexus. So we were talking specifically about kind of the state of security and cybersecurity as it has to do with AI and the ways in which this empowers us, but also the things that we need to be careful about not building, and the things that we need to think about when we are building things responsibly. So that was last week. But I also spent a lot of time, writing blog posts and working on policy and sitting down and working directly with either organizations that need help with their privacy and security policies or operational security practices. I work directly with survivors of domestic abuse who call me up and basically say, how do I lock down my stuff? I help to work on EFF's privacy and security advice, which you can find at Surveillance Self-Defense, and you can get there at ssd.eff.org. But generally, what I try to do is I try to make sure that the things that I am doing are things that other people are not doing. Things that people are not motivated to do either because they're not sexy, there's not a great reward in terms of money or attention for them, The incentives are misaligned, and that is an area in which I really have the flexibility to step in and do something. And this is also the way in which I've conducted my security research over the years. I have been, a very successful security researcher precisely because I look where other people are not looking. And I try to protect people who are essentially being left out in the cold. And as a result, I can be a very lazy security researcher because honestly, anything I do is going to make a difference, and anything I find is going to be an important finding. And I encourage other people to do this, but it is very hard. It takes many years of experience to look at a problem and see who is not in the room, or to look at a problem and see what is not there and what people are not bringing up. And that's really where the years of experience come in.
Yeah, and so much gold right there. Just highlighting a few things is I love what you said, where it's a problem because you're missing data or you're missing information. So many people try to solve a problem with limited information and make bad decisions, but it's always who's not in the room, what additional data, what additional information do you need to be able to make a more confident decision or to be able to make the right decision. So I'll just sort of ask, with sort of all the things out there, what's right now sort of one of the big problems you're currently working on or trying to solve?
Well, I'm working on a couple of different things right now. One is I am looking at data sovereignty, which is really big outside of the United States right now. People in other countries are starting to realize that the U.S. is not a reliable partner in the area of cybersecurity, and they are trying to move themselves off of U.S. platforms and wean themselves off of U.S.-based tools and supply chains. And so there are some ways in which this is very good for them, not necessarily for U.S. companies. And there are some ways in which one of the big pitfalls of this kind of approach can be essentially just recreating all of the same systems we have here, only with a different government wearing the boot stamping on a human face forever. So I try very hard to convince the people who are working on digital sovereignty in other countries to really rethink what digital sovereignty means and to pursue a digital sovereignty that is not sovereignty for the state, but sovereignty for the state's people. So a very people-centered approach to this. Another thing that I'm working on is there's a working group over at the IETF on detecting unwanted location trackers. And so I've spent a bunch of time for the last several years as part of a working group trying to come up with a standard for the makers of location trackers and the people who build the networks that the location trackers work on. And the whole idea is that every location tracker should, if it is following a person who the location tracker is not paired to, should alert their phone or have some other way of alerting them to the fact that they are being tracked. And this is an anti-stalking measure. This is sometimes unpopular because I have people tell me, but what if somebody steals my wallet? What if somebody steals my bike? I will no longer be able to track them without having it alert their phone or emit a beeping noise. And then how will I get my stuff back? And the answer is that you absolutely cannot make a device that only tracks bad people without alerting them. And so we had to make the decision that people are more important than property, and try to build this this standard sort of around that principle. But standards making is one of those things that takes a really long time, and the devil is absolutely in the details. So I'm sitting in a lot of meetings with rooms full of cryptographers, trying to figure out how we're going to make this all work in a way that makes sense and that can easily be implemented. Because if you work at a company that makes these devices or that makes these networks, you don't want to be standing there trying to make sense of a standard that's just not implementable. It asks you to do a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. This is also a thing that we often encounter in government. You will see government regulations and legislation get passed that simply asks companies to do things they can't do, or that they don't want to do, and that don't make any sense, and that don't accomplish the things that they are, ostensibly trying to accomplish with this regulation or legislation. And so I spend a lot of time reading proposed legislation and regulations, and I spend a lot more time trying to stop bad legislation and bad regulation than pushing for good legislation and good regulation, because honestly, good legislation and regulation is thin on the ground.
Yeah, so much good info to unpack there. But a couple things I want to highlight is one, thank you for saying that. Humans are more important than computers. Yes, yes, yes. And I think we're starting to forget that with AI and sort of putting things where like people are doing things where I'm like, wait, that's good for the computer, bad for humans. Why are we doing that? Like that doesn't make any logical sense. So yeah, definitely on board with that. And yeah, definitely same thing where, especially in the United States, we need more good legislation, not bad. But the problem we have is because we're behind is now it's all this rush game. And like you said, there's a lot of good titles with bad legislation being pushed through. And let's sort of go there a little bit for those sort of in the US and even outside, like you said, with sovereignty where people are pulling away. How do we deal with this challenge? Because we're really behind. Like you look at other countries and you can say they're overregulated, but there's a lot more regulation and compliance on privacy and AI and cybersecurity. And in the United States, it's just really still at a state level and not a lot at a federal level, and makes it harder to sort of prosecute or stop bad behavior. How do we challenge that where our government is just behind and slow and not focusing on what they need to focus on?
Well, to begin with, not everything is the government's job.
Yep.
Especially when the government has a track record of not doing particularly a good job. I'm not sure that sitting around waiting for the government to come save us is really the way to go here. No one is coming to save us. That is why we have
love
to
that.
save
That's
each
my favorite phrase. No one is coming to save you. Yep.
Having said that, I think that there is sort of a divide between sort of where the U.S. is vis-a-vis Europe in privacy versus security. I think that the U.S. is actually ahead of the game when it comes to security legislation. I think it is way behind when it comes to privacy legislation and regulation. And one of the reasons for that is that it's just incredibly hard to get any kind of federal legislation passed right now. We've really been in a tremendous state of gridlock. And as a result, the states have really stepped in to, kind of fill that role. And so you get strong privacy protections in states like California, but if you are in Texas, not so much. And that is a really serious problem because then it feels like you are actually living in 50 different little countries, 50 different jurisdictions, each of which has its own unique snowflake of laws that you must now integrate just to, operate in the United States. And that's kind of that's pretty annoying. We don't like it. Having said that, there are some things that are fairly successul on the federal level. Some federal legislation that keeps coming up. It doesn't quite pass, but it's sort of it's perennial. And unfortunately, all of those are bad ideas. Some things that we keep seeing over and over again are mandates to backdoor end-to-end encryption. We see this in both the United States and in Europe. I'm looking at you. What was it? The something chat. I can't remember the name of the proposal. Anyway, it was very bad in Europe. But the point is that every year someone gets it in their head that in order to protect the children or in order to save us from the terrorists, we need to backdoor all end-to-end encryption because we need to see what is going on there in order to catch the bad guys. And just as you cannot create a tracker that doesn't alert bad guys, that is not a perfect stalking device. You cannot create a back door that only good guys can use. And we see this over and over again. We saw this with the Salt Typhoon hacks, which took advantage of the U.S. CALIA backdoors, which were, again, a legally mandated backdoor to our communications system that was only supposed to be used by the good guys. And so creating more of these backdoors is a very bad idea. And we keep having to go up to the Hill and explain this to lawmakers, and the pushback that I get from lawmakers is, well, just nerd harder, nerds. Surely you can come up with a technical solution for this problem. And the technical solution is don't do it. Like, your idea is bad. It's not going to work. And the people who tell you that this is a solved problem are the people who will profit from selling you a product, but are not people who are actually going to create something that is going to work for everyone long term, and that is not going to create a major spill when it is hacked, which is honestly inevitable. We also have seen a lot of different laws passed having to do with age verification online. So again, the argument is that if you are a teenager, if you're 12 or 13, we don't want you using social media because social media, we have decided, is simply not good for you, and we don't want people under 18 having access to porn. And so what we need to do is we need to age gate most websites. So that's a bit of a problem, because once you start age gating websites, the real question becomes how do you know that somebody is as old as they say they are?
Confirm you're over 18, right?
Yes,
Exactly.
confirm you're over 18. And the way that they want people to do this is by handing over a bunch of very sensitive information about who they are and what they are doing, which again has to be stored somewhere, and will inevitably be compromised. So that's a really serious problem, and it also prevents a lot of people who have the right to use these platforms and for whom it is entirely legal from using them. So we see these laws being proposed in the United States. We have seen them go through on the state level, and we have also seen them in other countries. Australia, for example, has recently implemented its age verification law, and I think you have to show your ID in order to use social media. That is, well, we're going to see how that goes, but my prediction is that it's going to go poorly.
So spot on and agree completely. I mean, especially with a lot of these different laws, like the one, it got a lot of hype, and I'm definitely behind it. And I like the concept, the Take It Down Act. But in reality, the big tech is now using it as a way to say, okay, we can turn off an encryption and monitor you. And it's like, no, that's not what it was meant to do. But it's like they're using these laws and then using it to basically hurt us, not help us on that front. So you're definitely concerned. So I guess if we sort of go back to your theme, no one's going to save us but us. What are things, like as a community, individuals and leaders in the space, what can we start doing to sort of start helping and fixing the problem, recognizing that the government's going to act slow and maybe too little too late?
Well, there are a couple of things that we could do. Obviously, when bad legislation is being considered, you should contact your representative and tell them that you are a person who works in this community, who is able to make decisions at a very high level, and that this is not actually going to accomplish what it sets out to accomplish, and is in fact going to make people less safe, and is going to be tremendously harmful to their privacy, which they deserve. Generally, when contacting your representative, an email is kind of the lowest rung, and then one step up from there is a phone call, and then several steps up from there is an actual visit to your state representative. But let me tell you, the visit to the state representative carries a lot of weight, and a phone call is at least something that you can do from home. So those are the things that I recommend. EFF usually has alerts that we send out if there's a situation in which contacting your representative can be useful. So if you go to www.eff.org, we have an action center, and it usually has a bunch of different alerts for things where contacting your representative is useful. Additionally, there are some things that you can do as part of your job. When you are deciding sort of what kind of information to gather and how to respond to law enforcement requests and how to do your data minimization, when you're deciding what to build and how to build it, I think it's really important. And again, your listeners are the people who are making these decisions and who can push back on bad arguments. If you start seeing the people who are in charge of your architecture saying, we need to see everything and we need to keep everything indefinitely, it's up to you to stand there and say, what are you going to do in the event of a data breach? When you get people saying, you can't have end-to-end encryption because then we can't see what people are saying and therefore we can't turn around and monetize it, say, well, maybe not everything needs to be monetized. And I think it's really important for the decision makers to understand that part of their job is to speak up for the people who are not in the room.
Yes. No, agree completely. And I know one area that's getting a lot of concern is with technology, it always seems functionality leads and then security and privacy always follow behind. And there's a lot of concern on the new glasses that can like record people, monitor people, track people, and using it for stalking, video recording on all. How do you deal with those situations where, unfortunately, in the United States, you just can't go up and punch somebody or smash their glasses? I'm told that's frowned upon and will get you in trouble. So like, how do you deal with some of these threats out there where the laws are just not caught up to say it's not allowed, but the technology is already there and being used in harmful ways?
Oh, funny story. There was, interestingly enough, there was a memo leaked from inside of Meta in which they were discussing sort of whether or not to deploy facial recognition technology in the Ray-Ban glasses. And lots of people have been pushing for this because honestly, if you look out at a crowd and you can see what everybody's name is based on matching to facial recognition data, boy, that's really useful. Never go to a party again and go like, who are you again?
That would help me a lot. I'm terrible with names, right? Hey, Eva, how you doing?
Absolutely, same here. And that would be great. So again, there's a lot of demand for this in the same way that there's lots of demand for Bluetooth-enabled tracking devices that will not alert a thief. But again, you have the same problem. You cannot implement this kind of facial recognition without it being a tremendous privacy violation, without it becoming a tool for stalking, without it becoming a tool for law enforcement to target people who are doing absolutely nothing wrong, without it becoming a tool for mass surveillance and abuse. And so you shouldn't build it. But the funny thing is that the memo inside of Meta that was leaked essentially said, now is the perfect time to push facial recognition to the Ray-Ban glasses because the civil liberties organizations are so busy that they won't have time to be mad about this. They won't notice. Well, we noticed.
Yeah. So then what's the next step? Now that we've noticed.
The next step was actually to start a campaign, essentially saying like,
yeah.
This is a bad idea. It's going to lead to like an enormous amount of stalking. Like how many lawsuits do you want? Because let me tell you, they're coming. And I think that's something that Meta really doesn't hear often enough.
Yeah. No, and I remember when I was a kid. I was a mischievous kid, and I was playing around with a friend, and we blew up my shed. And my dad was like, "Why'd you do that?" I'm like, because we thought it would be cool. And I remember him looking at me going, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And I feel like in the tech arena, we have lost that logic factor where it's like, oh, it'd be cool, so let's do it regardless of what the repercussions or negative side of things are. So yeah, there's always that balance. Anything that can be used for good can be used for evil.
Well, that's also move fast and break things.
Yeah.
Which leads to a lot of broken things.
Yeah.
And some things that you can't put back together again, like a shed.
Yeah.
Additionally, the notion that technology is morally neutral. Technology is not morally neutral.
That's true.
Technology is political. Technology, especially a technology which gathers data about people, about what they're doing and how they're doing it and who they are and where they are located, is far from morally neutral. And if you don't minimize that data, if you're not careful about what you build and how you build it, and that information falls into the hands of authoritarians, it can become a tremendously powerful tool for oppressing people. And even if you trust the government now, even if you trust law enforcement now, it is possible for democracies to backslide. Do you trust the government forever and ever? Amen. Are you still going to trust the government after the next election or the election after that? Stuff changes, but the data's still there, man.
I completely agree. One of the things I always find with these podcasts is time flies when you're having fun, and it's amazing how quickly it did. So as we sort of start to wrap up, what message or call to action would you like to leave the listeners with on how can we help ourselves? How can we help you? How can we help society?
Well, a couple of different things. So first, you can become a member of EFF. Go to www.eff.org. You can support us by joining our mailing list, by taking one of our actions, or by becoming a member. And we will send you our lovely T-shirts and stickers, which you have probably seen at a hacker conference somewhere. We're basically a T-shirt and we're basically like a T-shirt and sticker organization with a law firm attached and some engineers. So please join. We have 40,000 members all over the world, and our membership, the fact that our membership provides us with just like so much money in small amounts, keeps us independent. It means that we don't have to depend on companies. We don't have to depend on governments. We depend on our members, and so we go out of our way to represent them and their needs. Additionally, you should spend some time thinking. When you are the decision maker at an organization, really try to make an effort to see who is not in the room. And to represent people who are vulnerable. When you are making products, when you are making plans, when you are building things for everyone, don't just think about people who are like you, who have the kind of problems that you have. Think about activists, think about journalists, think about people in authoritarian countries, think about survivors of domestic abuse, think about how you would use this tool if you have a stalker, if you are a journalist in, Saudi Arabia, if you are, seeking an abortion in a state in the United States where abortion is illegal, if you are seeking information about trans healthcare and you're a teenager. So these are all good things to think about when you're doing your work, because your listeners are particularly important people, and the things that they do matter, and they have knock-on effects for other people all the time.
Very well said. I love that. Think of others, right? Zoom out, think of the others, think of long-term impact. Or one thing I always say in security is sort of anything that can be used for good can be used for evil. So always go, how can the offense use this against us? And is this really the best thing? Because remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So Eva, thank you so much. Once again, give us that website where people can find you and join the organization.
Sure. You can find us at www.eff.org.
Awesome. Eva, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And our listeners, listen to this one a couple of times. There's a lot of good nuggets in there, a lot of good leadership, and a lot of good principles on how to basically live, be a better human, and make cybersecurity a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for next week.